Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video. My name is Adrian Field and I'm an expat entrepreneur currently living in Lisbon. The topic of today's conversation is going to be a bit taboo, but I think it's a really interesting one and worth talking about. And that is, what effect do we as digital nomads and expats here in Lisbon have on the current housing crisis? So if you're considering Lisbon as a place to live or you're already here, you are obviously, or you should be aware of the fact that there is indeed a housing crisis and a cost of living crisis that is very acute here in Lisbon. I was inspired to make this video because yesterday I was at a party with some Portuguese people and they asked me, why did you move to Lisbon? And kind of flippantly I replied, well, why not? And they said, the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, and then they went on to kind of insinuate that I, as an American and a digital nomad, was partly to blame for what's going on here in Lisbon. And it really got me thinking more, how much are we as one, either expats or digital nomads or Americans who are coming here on retiree visas or whatever the case may be, how much are we really to blame and how much role are we playing in exacerbating this issue? I think that it's worth taking a look at and really trying to figure out if we are indeed part of the problem. Like Taylor Swift says, hi, it's me, I'm the problem, it's me. So I started to dive into this and start researching and looking at the numbers, and some of them really shocked me. The one that stood out the most is the fact that housing prices here in Lisbon have doubled since 2016, and it just continues to rise at a rate that is obviously far beyond the rate of increases in people's salaries. And I've come across so many young people that are living here, whether they're Brazilian or Portuguese, who are here to work. And when they tell me how much they make, I'm really quite shocked. Yesterday, there was a girl who's a photographer working full-time for a fashion company here. She told me that she makes 1,200 euros a month. I have another friend that's Brazilian, a younger guy, but has the equivalent of a master's degree in architecture from Brazil, is working full-time for an architecture firm, is also earning something around 1,200 euros a month. I live above a Michelin star restaurant here in Lisbon, and I overheard them as they were interviewing a chef who, again, has experience in Michelin star restaurants, and the salary that you could expect to make here is between 1,300 and 1,500 euros a month. And I really don't know how people can survive on this amount of money here in Lisbon, because while compared to the rest of Western Europe, people say that this is not as expensive, but this is still an expensive place to live. And the average housing price right now in Lisbon is actually 2,000 euros a month. Now that number really shocked me. I'm paying just a bit under that to live here in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment in the heart of Lisbon, but rents are very expensive here, and most young people who are here to work and are earning local salaries, they don't live alone. They almost always have roommates, and they live not necessarily straight in the center of the city, but a little bit outside. Because it's been over half a year since I was looking for an apartment and had signed my lease, I was curious to take a look again on Idealista, the website most people use to search for long-term housing here in Portugal. In the center of Lisbon, you can see that it's hard to find anything for under 1,500 euros a month, and the apartments available for under that price tend to be very small studio apartments on the outskirts, which often need renovation. So for more affordable apartments, you have to look outside the center of Lisbon, which is again what's causing this displacement of local people from the center of Lisbon into the outside. Now, it's quite shocking that a city like Lisbon has an average housing price of 2,000 euros a month when 50% of the population of Portugal is living on around 1,000 euros a month, and the minimum wage here is somewhere around 700 euros a month. Now, you have to contrast that with the fact that the digital nomad visa, the D8 visa that I've come here on, requires a minimum monthly earning of around 2,800 euros a month. So when you compare the earning power that someone like me has, which is over 2,800 euros a month, with what the average salary here in Portugal, being around 1,200 euros a month or something like that, it's a very vast difference. So when I was looking for an apartment here in Lisbon, the demand is so high and the competition is so high that it really is pushing up prices. I think I had already told the story in a previous video when I found this apartment that it was listed at 1,750 euros a month, and my realtor recommended to me that if I really wanted to get this apartment, I should offer even more than that. So I ended up having to offer 1,800 euros a month plus pay 6 months upfront, basically, which was 3 months upfront plus a 3-month security deposit, and they had actually even wanted more than that. I had to negotiate down because they had asked me for 5 months of a security deposit. Now, this is just completely outrageous, and I mean, I could barely afford to do that, so imagine a normal person. It's just not possible, and I don't understand really what the situation is, but I don't necessarily think that there are so many people necessarily like me, but I think that there are a lot more people, especially Americans, who are coming here who are much older, who are retired, who are on truly passive income from either Social Security or maybe they own some properties in the United States. And so for them, they have a lot more flexibility and spending power. Now, for me, for the past 7 years before I moved to Portugal, I was living in much less expensive countries. I was the last 4 years in Indonesia. Before that, I was in Thailand, and before that, in Mexico. So if you take what my average rent across those three countries was for the last 7 years, it was probably between, maybe let's say like $700 a month. So that's almost what I think the average person here in Lisbon who is here to work is more or less paying. But there I was doing it in, let's say, third world countries, and here we are in Western Europe. And it's not just housing that's expensive here in Lisbon. Again, I'm comparing to where I've been living in the past, but food is obviously expensive. If you have a car, gas is expensive. Everything kind of really adds up here, and my personal living expenses to me are double what I was paying to live in Bali. Now, again, it's hard to compare Asia to Western Europe, but Portugal is one of the poorest countries in Western Europe. And this was really something that I was curious, well, why? Who is actually responsible for this situation? Is it truly, Americans and digital nomads who are moving here that are, displacing the Portuguese? Because it seems like it's a much deeper problem than that. It seems like this is really a political issue that's been going on for a while, where Portugal is exporting its youth to other countries where they can earn more money, either other Western European countries like France or Germany, and they seem to be importing wealthy international people. Previously, with the golden visa, where you could invest something like 400,000 or 500,000 euros to buy a property, and then you would be fast tracked for a residency visa. The government has actually put a freeze on that program, but again, they did add in this digital nomad visa, which has allowed me to come here. Now, previous to that digital nomad visa, there was the D7 passive income visa, which most of the digital nomads or people who are earning income outside of Portugal were using to come here, and that had a much lower threshold for entry, where you only had to prove that you had a passive income of over 700 euros a month and some amount of money, like 1 to 2 years in savings. So a lot of people previous to this year were moving here on that type of visa. I think that those people generally were earning less money, or again, just kind of a different living situation. Now, there are about 14,000 digital nomads who are here in Lisbon. And what's shocking is that's not such a big number, so we can't be fully responsible for the housing crisis that's going on. Especially what's interesting to me is that when you walk around in the historical center of Lisbon, there are so many dilapidated buildings that all they would need to do is have someone come in, renovate them, and you could make more housing. So it doesn't seem like there's actually a lack of space in Lisbon. It just seems more that there's a lack of investment and forward thinking about how to make more housing for people. Again, going back to what could be the root of this problem, why is Portugal such a poor country in comparison to others in Western Europe? Well, Portugal has one of the lowest productivity rates of developed countries in Western Europe. It's about half of what it is in the United States and Germany. So I think that maybe Portugal needs to look at its own history and its own kind of culture of bureaucracy. I mean, my experience when I have to do anything bureaucratic here is that it's rather challenging and rather long, and maybe if they were to cut down on some of these things, it could help. But Portugal's history is such that they were in a dictatorship up until the 70s, and in contrast with Spain, which also had a dictatorship up until around the same time, here in Portugal, the dictatorship really kind of kept people in the dark. The literacy rates were really low, the education was poor, and so you still find that there's a bit of a hangover from that in a lot of the kind of government systems, where people are not really wanting to take responsibility and just push the responsibility up the chain of command. So I think that some of these things maybe have stifled entrepreneurship, and it just is really surprising as well, because Portugal has such an incredible potential. When you meet the average Portuguese person, they're incredibly intelligent. I mean, not just bilingual in the sense that so many people that I meet my age are completely 100% fluent in English, but they are really smart and worldly and well-traveled. And I just find that, again, there's so much potential in this country. For me, one of the things that drew me to moving here as well is that there's such a great culture of craftsmanship as well in this country, especially in fashion and textiles. So Portugal is really great with making shoes and with making clothes and all of these things. And it just seems that there's a lot of undeveloped and untapped potential for Portugal to really be, I don't know, doing more and making it so that its young people stay here and have more opportunities rather than exporting them to other countries and importing either people like me or I think what the bigger problem is, again, is the retirees who are coming here. One of the things recently that the government has done to try to stymie this problem of rampant housing inflation is to put an end to all new Airbnb licenses in Lisbon. So I think that this is a really big problem, has been that there are a lot of neighborhoods here, such as, for example, Alfama, which have just become mostly for tourists and with tons of Airbnbs. And so there are not so many locals living there because people saw this as an opportunity to come in, invest, and make them as short-term rentals. But as people know, this really destroys the soul of a city. So there had been a lot of demonstrations against this, and the government really did try now to pass this new law so that, you know, there's not just so much housing speculation, but that the housing that's being built is actually for local people to be living here and not just for short-term rentals and a quick buck. It would seem to me that people like me who are coming here as digital nomads, and again, not just people who are retired, I don't think that we are truly the problem. I think that one, the government has to kind of look at its own responsibility and its own history and its own culture for why it's gotten into this type of a situation. But also I think that people like me who are young and actually want to contribute something to Portugal have more to offer than that we are taking away. So yes, while I do come here with a higher earning power than the average person my age, I want to develop things here in Portugal, and I am spending quite a bit of money living here as well. Now, again, these are always kind of very touchy conversations. It was the same problem living in Bali, where the local people really did start to resent us foreigners and look at us kind of like neo-colonialists moving there with obviously a vast power difference, a vast economic difference, and there was this feeling of resentment, and I can completely understand that. But I mean, what is the other option for example, the Balinese? If there's no tourists, if there's no people who are coming there to provide jobs, then they kind of just have to probably revert to their agrarian roots. Obviously here in Portugal, I don't think it's as drastic nearly as that. There is still some kind of domestic industry here. And again, this is kind of what I was just talking about, that I think that there's a lot of potential in Portugal to develop its own domestic economy and industry that would provide more opportunities. And this is something that I really do want to play a part in. I want to develop a business here in Portugal. I want to explore what opportunities there are here and, you know, work with local people as well. I just think that if you are actually coming to move to Portugal, especially to Lisbon, you kind of have to be aware of what the situation is, aware that some people may look at you in a rather negative way, and it's understandable. I think that there's been such a vast influx of people over especially the last few years and post-COVID coming here, that the local people kind of are feeling displaced. And you know, this is just a very complex conversation, and this video is only reaching the tip of the iceberg on something that I think is far deeper and goes beyond, at this point, my complete comprehension, but is something that I want to learn more about and want to just be aware of. And again, I think that everybody coming here should be aware of what privilege they have, and you know, try to do your best to create opportunity or to fit in, or, you know, whatever the case may be. I don't think that there's an easy answer to it, but again, I think that awareness at least is part of what we need. That's it for this video. Thank you guys for following along. If you found this interesting, please give the video a like and consider subscribing to my channel for more types of digital nomad content, and also talking about just my life here in Portugal in general. I'm always really happy to share with you. So thank you guys, and until the next time, take care, and I'll see you later.